Well, this took on a life of its own yesterday. So, did you see? I was actually watching Fox News, or I had it on in the studios. I'm usually flipping through various cable news channels throughout the morning in the studios at KCMO. And I saw that this guy, his name is Mark Fisher. He was a co-founder of Black Lives Matter Rhode Island. And he went on Fox News and he talked about how he was supporting Donald Trump in the 2024 election, assuming Trump's the nominee, which he was supporting him for the primary, I assume, and then also for the general. So yesterday, Donald Trump brags about this on his Truth Social account. And he writes on his Truth Social account, spoke with Mark Fisher yesterday, a great guy, very honored to have his and BLM, Black Lives Matter, support. I love when Trump does this. It's pretty funny, actually. He goes, I've done more for black people than any president. And then he puts in parentheses, Lincoln, question mark. It's like, let's not include the Lincoln part, but it always gives me a chuckle. I'll give him that much. And I hope that's what he's going for, because usually I just laugh when I see it. He goes, including 10-year funding for historically black colleges and universities where they had none, opportunity zones, criminal justice reform, and much more. He says, thank you, Mark. So then what happens is Ron DeSantis jumps on it. And Ron DeSantis says, BLM praising Donald Trump and Trump celebrating it makes perfect sense. DeSantis writes, when BLM was burning down cities and assaulting police officers in cities across the country, Trump did nothing but sit in the White House tweeting law and order. DeSantis writes, we did it differently in Florida. I didn't just tweet, I took action and called up the National Guard. We were not going to let our cities burn. DeSantis writes, as president, I will not sit idly by and watch rioters torch American cities. So here's the thing. You have DeSantis people saying, look at Trump embracing BLM. And then you have Trump saying, I love this guy who co-founded the Rhode Island chapter of BLM. Let's cut through it all here, because BLM is not endorsing Donald Trump. This all stems from Donald Trump kind of miswriting his Truth Social post and maybe exaggerating, which I know he's never done before, right? Never exaggerated. This guy, Mark Fisher, was a co-founder of the Rhode Island Black Lives Matter chapter. In the big picture, he's a nobody. This is meaningless. It's irrelevant. But, Fox News will jump on it, and that's fine. They want to make it a story. That's cool. But it's also not what Ron DeSantis makes it out to be. When Ron DeSantis says BLM is praising Trump, that's not true.
Fake news.
One guy who was part of a Rhode Island chapter of Black Lives Matter is now embracing Trump. And if he wants to do that, that's great. I'm glad he is. But it's not what DeSantis is making it out to be either. But part of the reason he can play that card is because Trump did what Trump does, and that is somewhat exaggerate in his initial post when he wrote, I'm very honored to have Mark Fisher and BLM's support. I don't think Black Lives Matter as a chapter in Rhode Island, as I understand it, or anything nationally, is endorsing Trump. And by the way, if I was Trump, I would be wanting BLM support. If he wants to say, hey, this guy Mark Fisher used to be a member of Black Lives Matter, and now he's supporting me, and I appreciate his support. I appreciate him going on Fox News and talking about, what I've done and why he's supporting me, and maybe share the clip from the show. That's cool. I think that's a great idea. But in classic Trump fashion, he takes a story, he exaggerates it, and then his political opponents, like Ron DeSantis, are trying to beat him over the head with it in reverse after the fact. So in many ways, they're both wrong in how they handled it. But what I will say is DeSantis is actually trying to go after it. He's actually, which he hasn't really been willing to do, he's actually trying to go after Trump, which if you're him, is a smart move. I'm not saying it's the right move, but it's a smart move. Because DeSantis for so long has tried to kind of ride the fence of not criticize Trump, but then run against Trump. It's like, dude, you're running against him. You're running against him for a reason. All right? So man up, and if you're going to run against the guy, you got to be critical of him. because you're running against him for a reason. If you thought he was the greatest thing ever, then don't run and just embrace him and support him and endorse him. But you're running against him, so you kind of have to be critical. And it took him 6 months to realize that. And in the meantime, he's down, 30, 40 points in the polls, and it's not looking good for the guy. But I guess better late than never, maybe. I don't know if you're a DeSantis fan in this whole thing. But I just love how a random former Black Lives Matter guy that nobody knows now becomes the source of controversy in the whole thing. Oh, boy. 913-408-7957 is how you join us here on KCMO Talk Radio. Hit that preset on 95.7 and download the KCMO Talk Radio app. And the bigger picture here, too, the bigger conversation, is around how the vote's going to break down in 2024. There has been a lot of polling that has suggested that especially black men are far more open to voting for a Republican than they have at any point in modern American history. And I certainly think that there is some truth to that anecdotally, just based on, callers that we've heard from and people who have checked in with the show. But I will also add there was a similar narrative that was taking place in 2020. That a lot of people in urban neighborhoods, predominantly black neighborhoods, were realizing that organizations like Black Lives Matter were utter failures and were not helping the people they were intended to help. Right? The whole defund the police movement, all these things were not intended to help urban communities of high crime. It made woke white people feel good about themselves in the wake of George Floyd's death, but it didn't actually do anything to protect people in need. So what happened in 2020? Well, when you look at the numbers, Trump got, as we look at it here, in 2020, he got 12% of the black vote. Now, that's up from, I think, 9% what he got in 2016. And Mitt Romney got like 5 or 6% in 2012. So the trend is good, but, like anything else in politics, it takes a while to build a new coalition. But if you are the Republican Party, the smart thing that they're doing is they're building a coalition around working class folks of all backgrounds and all colors. Hispanic, black, white. They're building that middle class, working class coalition. And they've got to keep working on that. They've got to keep hammering that home. Because that's where you're going to find a lot of new voters. The Democrats often thought that as soon as we became a majority-minority country, meaning more people of color, for lack of a better word, than white people, they were going to win every election in the history of the country. But that's not happening. You're seeing a trend in a different direction in America, especially in the working class, where Hispanics are moving very heavily towards Republicans. And that's, I think, for economic reasons and cultural reasons. And yes, you're seeing Asians move towards Republicans in a way that they never have. You have some people don't talk about it, but there's a prominent group of Asian American members of Congress who are Republican women in Southern California. There's 3 or 4 new members of Congress from Southern California who are Asian American Republican women. Trust me, they began a lot more attention if the shoe was on the other foot. And then, of course, you make some inroads in the black community as well, and suddenly you've got a solid working class majority that you can win elections with. But, you got to do a lot of the groundwork to make that happen as well. Speaking of things happening here locally on the election front,